Have you ever wondered why you feel like a stranger in your own life? Why you look in the mirror and don't quite recognize the person staring back? It's not because you're lost. It's because you've never truly said who you are. You've whispered around your truth, you've adjusted to the expectations of others, and you've worn 1,000 masks just to be accepted. But in all that performance, you've silenced the most essential part of your being. The words you refuse to say are the bricks of the prison you live in. If you don't speak your truth, you'll never build a self worth living in. Most people think identity is something you inherit, or something you craft based on the approval of others. But the reality is more brutal and more liberating. Your identity is not what others see, it is what you are willing to reveal, not in curated pieces, not for applause, but in raw, honest speech. When you speak what you believe, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it threatens your image, you begin to shape something real. Until then, you're just performing roles. A truth spoken, however small, is a cornerstone in the structure of the self. And without those cornerstones, your so-called identity is a house of mirrors, endlessly reflecting others but never revealing your core. Each time you know the truth and choose not to speak it, a part of you erodes. Not dramatically, slowly, quietly, a tiny compromise here, a polite lie there, and over time, you become someone else, someone more acceptable, less threatening, more likable, but far less alive. Silence in this context is not peace, it is decay. You lose the sharp edges that define you. You become dull, faded, confused, and worst of all, you begin to doubt whether you ever had something worth saying in the first place. The only antidote is the decision to reverse that erosion, to speak, not recklessly, but truthfully. To recover yourself through your own voice. In a world obsessed with strategies for influence, speaking your truth is a moral decision, not a marketing one. It is not about impressing people or manipulating outcomes. It is about aligning yourself with reality, no matter the cost. Truthful speech is the rejection of superficial connection in favor of genuine meaning. It demands responsibility. You have to be willing to let people dislike you, to lose the comfort of fitting in, to walk alone if necessary, but the trade-off is real integrity, a life that holds together under pressure. Because when you speak your truth, you become solid. You become a person whose yes means yes and whose no means no. You become trustworthy, first to yourself and then to others. Every time you speak truthfully, you are drawing the map of your future. You are carving out space in the world that aligns with your values, your beliefs, and your vision. And when you stay silent, you abandon that power. You hand the pen over to fear, to manipulation, to circumstance. The future is not some random outcome, it is the echo of the words you dare to say today. This is not philosophical poetry, this is psychological law. When you speak the truth, you invite consequences, yes, but you also invite transformation. Your life begins to arrange itself around your deepest convictions. And that, ultimately, is how identity becomes destiny. Most people imagine identity as something you assemble the way a sculptor shapes clay. Add a bit of career success here, some social media flair there. Polish it with the right clothes, the right friends, the right hashtags, and voila, a recognizable self. But that self is brittle, like a statue exposed to the first hard rain. Strip away the outer ornament, and what remains? Often nothing but anxious uncertainty, because the structure was built from impressions rather than conviction. The real beginning of identity is not image, it is truth, the living, breathing experience of what you actually think, value, and perceive when no one else is judging. And you cannot reach that interior ground without language. The moment you dare to put your inarticulate hunches into precise words, you cut a path through dense psychological underbrush. Each accurate sentence is a clearing where you can finally stand and see. But here's the twist that frightens so many into perpetual performance. Speaking truth initiates risk. The instant you say, "This is what I really believe," you differentiate yourself from every rival idea, every comfortable lie, and every crowd-pleasing half-truth. You leave the warm haze of ambiguity and expose the naked outline of your convictions. Others can see it, and so can you. That exposure can burn, yet it also illuminates the contours of your authentic being. Without that illumination, identity remains fetal, suspended in potentiality instead of born into actuality. The baby steps of selfhood are the first frank words: I value this, I reject that, I fear this, I aspire to that. These statements function like genetic code for the person you are becoming. They instruct your thoughts, emotions, and actions on how to organize themselves into coherence. Consider how you feel after uttering an uncomfortable but honest admission, perhaps confessing a hidden passion, acknowledging a painful regret, or declaring a non-negotiable boundary. The body responds, pulse surges, breath quickens, a flush rises in the skin. That physiological jolt is evidence that truth has cracked the shell of performance. In that crack, something substantive appears, a self grounded not in approval, but in reality. Over time, the practice of truthful speech thickens this substance into character. Each act of candor adds structural integrity. Each evasion leaves a weak spot. Eventually, the composite of those choices determines whether you possess a resilient identity capable of bearing weight, or a hollow shell susceptible to collapse. Thus, the quest for image is not merely superficial. It is hazardous, because it tempts you to trade genuine being for fleeting applause. Speak the truth instead, and you give your emerging self the only foundation sturdy enough to support a life of purpose, uncompromised reality articulated through your own voice. Silence is often mistaken for strength, for patience, for peace. But when that silence is rooted in fear, self-doubt, or avoidance, it becomes something far more dangerous: erosion, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the slow, corrosive decay that happens quietly inside you. Each time you know what you believe, what you feel, or what you want to say, but you don't, you lose a piece of yourself. That might sound dramatic, but it's the truth. Your thoughts stay trapped in your chest, your boundaries dissolve in your silence, and your identity begins to blur. You may still function, still smile, still perform your duties, but internally you're drifting. The self, when not expressed, begins to disintegrate. You start to notice it in subtle ways. You no longer recognize your own reactions. You agree to things that contradict your values. You feel a quiet frustration, not just with others, but with yourself. It builds, resentment creeps in, not just toward people who misunderstand you, but toward the version of you who didn't speak up when it counted. And what's worse is that the longer you remain silent, the harder it becomes to even remember what your truth was in the first place. You lose access to the raw material of your identity. You stop knowing what you really think, what you really want, what matters to you. Your inner compass, once reliable, becomes clouded and uncertain. This is why silence, when it replaces honest speech, is never neutral. It creates space, but not for clarity. It creates space for others to project their expectations onto you, for systems to override your values, for fear to deepen its roots. You become reactive instead of proactive, floating through life guided by the momentum of other people's choices instead of your own internal convictions. The longer you live like this, the more difficult it becomes to break the cycle. The voice inside you grows faint, not because it lacks power, but because it has been ignored for too long. To rebuild that voice, to reverse the erosion, you must do the hard thing: speak. Speak even if it's awkward, even if it costs you comfort. Speak the truth of your experience, even when it contradicts the story others want to hear. Because each time you speak truthfully, you recover a part of yourself. You restore what silence tried to steal. You make the invisible visible, and in doing so, you begin to reclaim the person you were always meant to be, not the version shaped by silence, but the one forged in the fire of honest expression. To speak truthfully is not just to communicate, it is to take a moral stance. In a world filled with curated personas and filtered realities, truth has become a rare, almost rebellious act. We're constantly told to say the right thing, to be agreeable, diplomatic, marketable. So people learn to speak in circles, to signal, to please, to blend in, but none of that is rooted in truth. It's rooted in strategy, and the more we speak strategically, the more we betray the most essential parts of ourselves. When you speak only to manipulate an outcome or to avoid discomfort, you begin to sever the link between who you are and what you say. Over time, your speech becomes a mask rather than a mirror, and masks may protect, but they also suffocate. Truthful speech isn't concerned with convenience. It doesn't ask if others will applaud it or if it will be easy to say. It asks only one thing: is it real? And in answering that question aloud, something powerful happens. You align with reality. You stop bending to fit other people's illusions or expectations. You stop constructing narratives designed to win approval and begin building a life that is structurally sound from within. That's where the moral power of truth comes from. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes life honest. And a hard truth will always produce a stronger life than a comfortable lie. When you choose to speak honestly, especially when it costs you something, you reaffirm your identity. Not just to the world, but to yourself. You declare, "This is where I stand," and there is real strength in that declaration. It forces your environment to recalibrate around something stable: your values, your principles, and your authenticity. You may lose people, you may face conflict, but what remains will be real, and there's no substitute for the integrity that brings. When your words match your convictions, and your convictions are tested and proven by your speech, you become solid. Centered, grounded. That inner solidity is rare and it's earned. You can't fake it and you can't shortcut it. It requires discipline, humility, and the willingness to risk being misunderstood, but it's worth every cost. Because once you establish that foundation, that commitment to truth regardless of outcome, your identity stops being negotiable. It becomes embodied. People will sense it. More importantly, you will sense it. You'll walk into rooms with less need to be liked and more commitment to being real. And in a world starved for truth, that makes you not only rare, it makes you powerful. Every word you speak has consequences. Some immediate, some delayed, but all significant. What many people fail to realize is that your future doesn't arrive randomly. It isn't simply waiting for you at the end of the road. Your future is being shaped and sculpted by your present actions, and perhaps more subtly by your present words. When you speak truthfully, you are laying down the framework for the world you will eventually inhabit. You're drawing lines, setting boundaries, defining purpose, and establishing what you will and will not allow into your life. It may not seem dramatic in the moment, but over time, those small declarations accumulate. They become the architecture of your future. Consider this: every time you speak a truth about who you are or what you value, you attract or repel. You call certain things toward you opportunities, people, experiences, and you push others away. If your speech is grounded in truth, then what you attract aligns with your deeper self. But if your words are hollow, if you speak only to appease or impress, then what you bring into your life won't fit you. You'll find yourself surrounded by situations that contradict who you really are, and then you'll wonder why you feel so alienated from your own life. The answer lies not in fate or bad luck, but in the misalignment between your speech and your soul. The more consistently you speak from your truth, the clearer your path becomes, not easier, clearer. That clarity is everything. It allows you to make decisions with conviction instead of hesitation. It gives you the strength to walk away from what isn't right and to fight for what is. But none of that is possible if your words are dishonest. Truthful speech is not just expressive, it's directional. It sends signals into the world: this is who I am, this is what I will stand for, this is the kind of life I'm building. The world responds accordingly. Doors open, some close, people leave, others appear. Your environment begins to reflect your integrity. And that is how the future becomes something you co-create, not something you survive. This isn't just theoretical. It's observable. Look back at the moments in your life where you spoke honestly, even when it was hard. Weren't those the moments when everything began to shift? Weren't those the turning points, the awakenings, the beginnings of real change? That's not a coincidence. That's the nature of truth in motion. So if you want to live a life that feels aligned with your identity, you cannot wait for it to happen. You must speak it forward. Word by word, decision by decision, you are building the foundation of the person you are becoming. The truth is that most people spend their entire lives playing a role that was written for them by someone else's family, culture, fear, or social expectation. They move through the world hoping to be accepted, validated, or at the very least left alone. But what they sacrifice in that silent agreement is devastating. Their identity, because who you are cannot be discovered through performance. It must be spoken into existence. Your thoughts, beliefs, pain, values, dreams, these are not meant to remain hidden inside of you, unexpressed and unattended. They are meant to be named, formed, and brought forward through speech. Until you dare to speak your truth, you remain a stranger to yourself. You cannot construct a meaningful life with pieces of yourself still buried beneath silence. The process of becoming someone real begins with an act of great risk, telling the truth, not just to others, but to yourself. And then, having the courage to speak it out loud, to stand behind your words and accept the consequences they bring. Because make no mistake, truth has consequences. It may disrupt relationships, shift your direction, or even isolate you. But those consequences are not punishments, they are proof that something genuine is taking shape. They are the fire through which your identity is forged, and the more you practice speaking truthfully, the more solid and unshakable that identity becomes. Over time, you'll realize that there is no freedom without that fire, no peace without that pressure, and no self without that speech. Truthful speech forces clarity and invites conflict, yes, but it also attracts meaning. It rearranges your life to reflect your real values instead of your survival strategies. It's the difference between living a life you chose versus a life you tolerated. When you speak honestly, you stop outsourcing your direction to the crowd and begin leading yourself with conviction. Your decisions become anchored in authenticity, your relationships are built on something real, and your future takes a shape that mirrors your true self, not the self that's easy to digest, but the self that has been tried, tested, and revealed through courage. So the choice before you is not just between speech and silence. It is between reality and illusion, between becoming someone who merely exists and someone who lives deliberately, someone who chooses words that are sharp enough to cut through the fog and strong enough to build a life worth inhabiting. Your voice is not just a tool. It is a compass, a weapon, a bridge. It is the means by which your identity steps out of hiding and into being. Speak not because it's easy, but because everything depends on it. Speak your truth and you will build not just your voice, but yourself, certainly. Here's a thank you and goodbye note tailored for uploading with your video on how speaking your truth builds your identity. Thank you so much for watching this powerful and reflective message. If this video stirred something inside you, a realization, a moment of courage, or a deeper connection with your true self, then it has fulfilled its purpose. Remember, your voice is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Your truth matters. Your words carry the power to shape the person you are becoming. Don't let the world define you by default. Speak your identity into existence. If this speech added value to your life, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps this message reach others who may be silently waiting for permission to speak their truth. Turn on notifications to stay connected to more content that inspires clarity, confidence, and purpose. Until next time, stay bold, stay honest, and never stop becoming the person you're meant to be. Thank you once again, and goodbye for now. See you in the next video.